This is VIP VoIP. The purpose of the event is to connect people from like superstars in the world of tech to our local individual ecosystems. So Joel Gascoigne is our guest. He's the founder and CEO of Buffer, a social sharing application. They have 1 million users, over 1 million in revenue, and it all started with a landing page. So thanks for joining us, Joel. So basically, we've got a room full of Copenhagen entrepreneurs and a room full of Oslo entrepreneurs. And I thought that it's probably a good place to start just to give a little intro about yourself and a little intro about what Buffer is.
So Buffer was started from the UK in Birmingham for the first 8 months. And then, when I actually started Buffer, I was working full-time for 2 separate clients, doing web development work on the side. And over the course of those 8 months, managed to grow the revenues of Buffer to the point where I could drop that other work. And then I'd read so much about San Francisco and Silicon Valley that I was just had an urge to jump on a plane and kind of see what this place is all about. So that's kind of when I first came out here. And Buffer is, as mentioned, is a tool for individuals and businesses to help them with publishing to social media. So it's kind of like a marketing tool. And one of the key features we have, which is what we kind of got into the market with, is like the actual Buffer, which is a queue for your tweets or Facebook posts. So you could spend 5 or 10 minutes in the morning and line up the whole day or the whole week of social media posts. And Buffer will post them for you several hours apart, whatever you decide, your schedule. And then we also provide detailed analytics around everything that you share. So retweets, likes, comments, all those details. And then kind of as to set some context of where we are right now. So we've been running just over 3 years now. We're a team of 18. We're spread across, I think it's 14 different cities now. We're a fully distributed team. And we have about 1.3 million users at the moment. We have a freemium model, so we have about 18,000 paying customers, mostly on the $10 a month plan, and then some on business plans, which are $50, $100, and $250 a month. So January revenue was $325,000. So that's like an annual revenue run rate of about 3.9 million at the moment.
It all seems obvious now to line up your tweets and to tweet every 3 hours, for example. But at the time, was that an obvious thing? I mean, how early were you in terms of Twitter? And was it an obvious pain for people? Or did you predict that it was going to be a pain?
I think it was something that hit me as an obvious pain for myself, but I don't think it was obvious to that many people at the time. I think the idea of scheduling tweets and Facebook posts was something that people had done. So that was actually available in TweetDeck and Hootsuite. But the idea of making that more seamless. So the actual kind of the pain point that I found was I'd been on Twitter for about 1.5 years, and I'd started to share blog posts that I found interesting and lessons I was learning. I would always kind of share everything from, I had a previous stuff that I did for a year and a half, and I've shared all my learnings along the way. And to a point where I found that actually people really liked that. It was triggering retweets, and it was triggering conversation. I was getting to know more people by sharing those blog posts and those kind of quotes and just lessons from my journey. So that was when I decided I want to do more of that. I want to try and do this kind of on a regular basis. And that's when I started to look around, and I found TweetDeck and Hootsuite and found that they had the scheduling feature. And I actually used that for a while. But the thing was that I didn't really care about the exact time and date and time for the tweet, that was the way that scheduling worked in these products. We had to choose the date and then choose the time every single time. And I really cared just about post times a day. I just wanted to space them out, because the flow that I had was that I would read these blog posts in maybe a half an hour session in the morning and find 10 of them that I wanted to share, but I wouldn't want to share them all in one go and like flood my screen, nothing else post for the rest of the day as well. So I actually used a notepad for a while. I would write down when I've already scheduled things. Then I would go back to that notepad every time I scheduled a new one, and make sure that it was like 3 or 4 hours after the last one. But yeah, that became pretty cumbersome, and that was kind of when it hit me. When I had this notepad, like had this notebook workflow for like a week or so, and it was working, but I thought it could be easier.
So you had this pain, you identified it yourself, but how did you go about validating that other people shared this pain?
So to kind of set a little bit of context, I did this previous startup for a year and a half, and I didn't do that, so I didn't validate whether it was really a pain for other people, and that was a big mistake, and I ended up spending a year and a half on this other startup, and it never really was a huge pain point. It was like a little bit of a pain, but like not really enough to get too much traction or for people to pay or anything like that. So after that experience of spending a year and a half doing that, and also that was right around the time when Eric Ries started talking a lot about Lean Startup, or at least he started blogging about it. It wasn't a big thing. There was no book or anything at that point, but he was talking a lot about it. And I managed to catch one of his early blog posts about the Lean Startup movement, and it really just caught my attention because I think I'm scientifically minded. I did computer science. I really liked that idea that this can be a bit more of a science than it seems to be. So I really tried to take all of that into account when I was starting Buffer, and so actually the funny thing is the first thing I did when I had the idea for Buffer was just start coding, because I'm a programmer, so that was my natural thing to do. And then kind of a day later, I stopped myself and thought, well, I've been down this track before of just like building one thing after the next that I thought would work and not really validating. So I spent a little bit of time thinking, how could I validate this? And so what I decided to do was I put together a 2-page website, and it was basically you would have the landing page, and it had a headline, tweet more consistently with Buffer, and then it had like 1, 2, 3 showing you what Buffer would do, or actually what Buffer did, because the landing page made it look like the product existed. And then there was a plans and pricing button on the right hand side. So it was just 2 pages. That was the first page, that was the landing page, and it looked like the product existed, although this was like a couple of days after I had the idea and there was no product. And then the next page, when you clicked plans and pricing, it would go to a page that basically said, oops, you've caught us too soon, we're not quite ready yet, put your email in this box and I'll get in touch when we have something ready for you to try. And that really helped a lot. So I think what helped was that I got in touch with everyone once they put their email in that box, and I had actual conversations with people about the idea, the problem, and tried to figured out that other people did have that problem. And then, so that was kind of the first test. So I had like 2 validation tests. That first one was, will people use this? And then the next one I had was, will people pay for this? So I changed the 2-page website into a 3-page one. In the middle of those 2, I put a pricing page. So the new flow was landing page, you'd hit the plans and pricing button, and then you'd go to an actual pricing page. And then you'd have to choose a plan. There was 3 plans. There was free, $5 a month, and $20 a month at that time. And then once you clicked one of those plans, you would then get the same page where you put your email in, and then I would have conversations. And that time around, I had tried to have conversations around the price point. And so I did those 2 tests in the first like 1 or 2 weeks of having the idea, and then I went, and then after some emails and a couple of Skype calls with people, I was kind of convinced enough. I think you can never have it's never fully validated until someone actually is using it and paying for it. So, but it was enough for me, and it gave me that confidence. So I went ahead and built the first minimal version of the actual product, and from having the idea to launching the first version was about 7 weeks, and I was working full time at that time for other people. So that was just like evenings and weekends. So it started as evening and weekends, and I realized I was too tired in the evening, so I started getting up a couple 2 or 3 hours earlier and doing it in the morning before I would work. That worked really well. Yeah, and then after 7 weeks, I'd collected about 120 emails, had a lot of great conversations, and I decided I need to actually just get this out there. It was getting to that point where I felt like, oh, I've worked on this a bit too long, even since I've had that validation, and I really wanted to get it out there. It was getting me a bit uncomfortable that I hadn't put it out there, so I decided to do it. It was still very early. There was a lot of bugs and issues, but put it out there, launched, and I emailed all these 120 people, and I tweeted on my Twitter account and things, and I think 50 people signed up on that first day, and then after 3 days I had the first paying customer, and then from there it was pretty slow ramping up, really to the point where I could kind of drop my work and things, but it was clearly working in a completely different way than I'd experienced before with the previous startup, and then since then it's really, I think that's the beauty of kind of SaaS, is that it really is compounding. So it's kind of, it blows my mind sometimes that the revenue we do now compared to like the whole of the first month revenue was maybe like $25, and then it just compounds from there, right? Because people are actually paying every month.
So you mentioned you had 1.3 million users, and you mentioned it took you 7 weeks to get your first pay in. I wanted to know what was more exciting, to get the first or the 1 million?
I think definitely the first. It was actually a huge moment for me because, I was working full time for 2 different clients at the time, and I was making a decent amount doing that, and that was something that I'd kind of figured out how to do. I could build websites and web applications for people and get paid for that, but that was always getting paid for my time, and it was like providing a service. And it was like a couple of years earlier than that it somehow just hit me that I really wanted to figure out how to get paid in a more scalable way and kind of escape that hourly wage in a way. So then I got hooked on the idea of building a product and people actually paying for that. And I never managed to achieve that with the previous startup. I had a lot of things that I learned from that, and it didn't work out. But yeah, so when I finally saw, and it was $5. It was $5 in from PayPal hit my inbox. So not very much, but I remember I was like dancing around the room because it was just a completely different feeling. I knew that was scalable. You know, if that person found it useful enough to pay $5, and if he actually continued using it, then I knew that could be huge. So massive moment. Even the next few payments after that was just had the same feeling, and it was just awesome.
So you were working at the same time as starting Buffer, and you mentioned you were working in the evenings and the weekends, and then you switched to the mornings. Something that the Buffer blog talks a lot about now is personal development. Was it then that your interest in personal development started, or were you already kind of playing around with that?
That's a really great one. I think I was playing around with it for a little while by the time I started Buffer. I think it comes as a requirement when you have like these constraints and you're trying to do something. I was in this position where I could make money, I could get by building websites for people, but my end goal was always something else, was to build my own thing. So to juggle those things, it was definitely a bit of a challenge, and that's where it naturally became useful to look into these things. And I think since then it's just grown and compounded, and it's become, so it's actually one of our 9 values of the Buffer culture is to have a focus on self-improvement, and it's a core part of the blog as well.
So you have, you said you have 9 values.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are the other values that you guys have as a company?
Oh, now you're testing me.
Yeah.
No, it's good. So we have positivity and happiness, which is the first one. We have default to transparency, probably one of the ones we're most well known for. We put all of our numbers out there, revenue, everything, and we also everyone has a jawbone up. So this is kind of the self-improvement value and the transparency value. This tracks your steps and your sleep, and then we have everyone has the iPhone or Android app, so we can kind of see each other's sleep and help each other improve and things like that. So yeah, transparency. Then we also have listen first, then listen more, which is really all about empathy. We have gratitude, which I feel is really, really important to have gratitude for customers, but also for open source. Everything's built on top of what other people have built already, and then having gratitude for other team members as well. And I think that's just really something that helps a lot. It can be quite destructive to have any kind of sense of entitlement. So that's a key value. Yeah, that's a few of them.
Yeah, I wasn't going to count and hold you to it's just a little test. I wanted to ask you about transparency actually, because it's the value that you're most known for. But have you used transparency in a way as a growth hack? Because you're so well known for it, by putting your numbers out there, you get people talking, people can trust you. Is it just a growth hack, or is there something else to it?
So yeah, I think it might be a nice side effect that we've had. It definitely wasn't the key intention of the transparency. I also think that we have had a lot of press around the transparency, especially recently. We've done the salary transparency where we shared. So we have a formula internally to determine the salaries of everyone in the team, and we shared not only the formula but all the individual salaries. Everyone in the team is really excited about that value that we have, and so they were really happy about that. But that was definitely something that caused a lot of attention. We were mentioned in many different media sites as a result of that. But at the same time, I don't think that triggered significant sign-ups. I don't think it's really going to move the needle necessarily on user acquisition. If we had that kind of press in the first few months, it would be massive. Like, it would have caused a lot of sign-ups. But the level we're at now, which is like about 2,500 sign-ups a day, even that kind of press doesn't necessarily move the needle with getting sign-ups. So I think I would say it probably has been a great branding hack, maybe not like a growth hack, but it's really helped us to become known for something, and that's something we're happy to be known for. It also has helped us a lot with hiring, so it helps people to know what we're about, and I'm kind of happy that we've managed to we've always had that value of transparency and felt very strongly about it. I think, but now we've managed to take that to a point where it's not just a great thing that's appealing for everyone. It's gone to the point where some people absolutely love it, and other people say, you can't do that, that's just crazy. And that's great, because I think transparency is often just this thing that you can't argue with and everyone says is good. But I think it's been very useful for us to kind of be a bit polarizing there. And so that's helped with hiring, because culture fit is our most important aspect for hiring. So if we can figure out, if someone's uncomfortable with sharing their sleep with the rest of the team, that's great. Or if someone's uncomfortable with having their salary in a blog post, that's also great. So, yeah.
Do you think there's ever a worry that it could, can you ever be too nice? Can you, if you put yourselves up on a pedestal in terms of honesty and transparency, can it come back to bite you, or could some people potentially mistrust you and be kind of suspicious of your motives, do you think?
I think, I guess there's a couple of things. I really like your point about being suspicious. That's a good one. I think the first one I'd say is well, let me just think. So I think in terms of being suspicious, I think it's all about, how far do we go with it, and do we get caught up in, I think it would be easy for us to get caught up in, this gets us press, let's do more of that. And that's something I've tried to be very conscious of, because there's actually a lot more valuable things I could do with my time than do interviews for press. So try to be quite selective there, and I think it could turn around and be like we get press, and transparency is an easy way for us to get press, and I think that would be definitely dangerous. Yeah, I think I was thinking there might be another point to make there, but I lost it a little bit. In terms of whether it could actually be a negative thing at times, I think it definitely probably can be. I mean, all of our competitors know pretty much everything about us because we publish everything. We have internal reports on hiring, on our overall. I share the exact investor update that I email to our investors once a month. We publish that on the blog. We have reports about our customer support, and we publish all these things. So competitors can see everything that we're doing. We pretty much share everything that we're sharing internally almost. So I think that probably could backfire, or could be used in some ways. I don't really know quite how, but I assume that it could be, and we don't necessarily have that information about other people. So I think that's something that we're just happy with. I think that's not really a concern, but I think it's important for us to know that there's kind of pros and cons here, and we definitely believe that it's the right thing to do, just to be honest, and it holds us to a higher standard because we're going to share all of our decisions. And so there's just so many different benefits, and it helps other people. We share how we structure our salaries, and I'm actually working right now on to share how we structure our equity compensation as well. And this is exciting because I've had people that I've met for coffee to help them with their startups, and they say to me, I really loved your salary formula. We're actually using that now, and that's really cool. And it's kind of like open source, right? People can give feedback, positive or negative, about everything we're doing, and that's great for us, and it's great for everyone, I think.
Does it ever affect the decisions you make? Because you might kind of not want to do something because you think, we're going to have to declare this, or does it actually affect your day-to-day decision making, knowing that everything is going to be out in the open?
I think it probably does. I think it does in many positive ways because, I mean, salary is one good example, right? Most of the time, salary is just based on whoever negotiates the hardest, or it's can be quite ad hoc, really. And it was for us for the first year, and that's when, after the first year, then we thought we want to be transparent about this just internally, not with the whole public. But then we thought, okay, if we're going to do that, we really need a systematic way to do it. So I think in that regard, it has affected our decisions, and it's made us have better decisions. I think there might be times where we can get a little bit trapped in by the transparency, especially around. There's a couple of things that we're not necessarily completely transparent about, which is when it comes to personal matters. So that's the kind of thing where even and if we're letting someone go, we don't necessarily have complete transparency around that during the time that it's happening, and that's something that we'll announce. And we have a lot of transparency after it's happened and say why it's happened, and we talk many times and explain it all. But I think, I think there's times where maybe our decisions could be affected. That's probably one I can think of. But I think overall, I feel like with transparency, I feel like there's so many positives, and it's quite easy to think about the negatives and focus on those. And it's one of those things that's a bit scary. It's like, oh, something's going to happen, something bad's going to happen with this, and I think probably something bad will happen at some point. But there's all the positive things that happen all the time when none of this negative stuff's happening, that I think far outweigh it, but don't get as much attention.
So I think even more than your values, you're pretty much, obviously you have your tool, which is very well known, but your blog is kind of famous and has driven a lot of users to using the tool itself. How important do you think it is to have a blog with content as a customer acquisition tool, and kind of what lessons can you give to us here in Copenhagen and to Oslo, and how we can do that, implement those in our blogs?
I think it's important to think about whether it could work. I think it probably doesn't necessarily work for every situation. It depends who the target audience is and whether they read content and whether you could kind of create content that would be interesting for those people. Luckily for us, on the consumer side, we always had, the life hacking and the so we have like life hacking and productivity and that kind of thing on one side, which is more on the consumer, free and small business users, and that's kind of being great. That's like the life hacker style content, and we always try and just have a very high quality with our content and very well researched, not really opinion pieces, more factual, like heavy research pieces. That's worked really well for us. And then on the other side, we have kind of social media content, so actually helping people with social media, a bit more direct kind of relationship with our actual product. And I think we're lucky that both of those things are things that people like to read content about. And so we can just deliver really great content, and then people get curious about who we are, what the product does. And sometimes there's a direct link to the product in a post. We used to do that more in the early days, and now not so much. Now it's just about great content. But one interesting thing to mention is how we ended up doing content marketing, which is so after I'd launched Buffer, about a month and a half after that, I probably had about 150 total users and maybe 6 paying customers. And it was just hit that point where I knew that as a developer, I needed to focus a bit more on marketing than continuing to build stuff out, because there was still a lot of features that didn't exist, but there was enough people paying that I knew there must be other people out there that would also pay. And so it was kind of like, it's going to give me more benefits if I actually switch a bit more to marketing. And that's when my co-founder Leo joined me, and he really started to think a lot about marketing. And the first thing he tried was to reach out to a lot of tech blogs. So tried to reach out to TechCrunch, The Next Web, all these guys, VentureBeat, GigaOM. And in some ways, we're lucky that we just got pretty much no reception from these guys. No one replied to us. We didn't know how to pitch them. We used like the main email addresses instead of trying to find specific writers. We just did all those things kind of wrong in a way. And since then, we've figured out a lot of that stuff. But in that point where we knew we needed to focus on marketing and we approached it that way, the fact that it didn't work helped us then to think, oh, what else can we do? And that's when we thought, well, why don't we just write? And so in the early days, we had no audience on our own blog, that was also a problem. So then we finally realized, oh, there's lots of other blogs out there that already have an audience that we could write for. And that's how we got started with content marketing and guest blogging. And so we we started with pretty small blogs and kind of worked our way up. Once we had that credibility, we had other articles to refer to. And then it became a mixture of guest blogging for other blogs and writing articles on our own blog. And the guest posts would always have a link back to the main blog, because we'd have like the author bio at the bottom of the post. And that really helped us to grow our own blog much faster than we ever could have. And then now we focus much more on our own blog, and instead of doing guest posts that are kind of nice, exclusive to other blogs, we have a lot of syndication partnerships where our posts get published on other places. So Fast Company, The Next Web, Huffington Post, Inc. We have a lot of partnerships with these guys where many of our articles on the Buffer blog get republished on these other websites.
I'm going to ask one more question before I hand it over to the floor to see if there's any questions. So you did the landing page, you did the content marketing. Do you have, what if someone had an idea in this room right now, what would be the 3 things they should do to see if there's any legs in it? What could they do as soon as you finish the call? What could they do tomorrow? What could they do the day after?
I would say the key thing really is to figure out whether is to validate it. It's kind of this idea of product market fit, which is sometimes a little bit of a ambiguous term, but I think it's totally the right term. It can be hard to define when you have product market fit, but it basically means that it's something that's working, that people want. And I could tell the difference completely between the previous startup and Buffer. Like, we hit product market fit. And so actually Sean Ellis has a really great test for whether you have actually hit product market fit. He tried to define it more, and if you just Google Sean Ellis product market fit, he has there's a 7-question survey that he says you should ask your users to do to determine if you've hit product market fit. And there's only one important question in the 7, which is how would you feel if you could no longer use this product? And if 40% of people say they will be very disappointed, so it's like very disappointed, disappointed, not disappointed, and so 40% of people need to say they'd be very disappointed. And so I would say the thing to focus on today or tomorrow is just to think, how do you get to that point where you have something that has product market fit that people would be really disappointed if they couldn't use, that becomes like a core part of a core activity for them. And so to do that, I would really focus a lot on the qualitative feedback. I got a little bit trapped when I was doing my landing page test into the quantitative side, which is like having mixed panel in place and thinking about metrics and stuff. But the thing is, you have so little volume at that point that really the best way you can get useful feedback is by actually just talking to people. And it can be kind of hard, but emails, Skype calls, meeting in person, and I would focus on trying to talk about the problem rather than showcasing the potential solution. So that's really the best possible thing you could do when you first have an idea, is to have a conversation with someone, not about the idea, but about the problem, and then have that person come up with your solution by you kind of asking questions about the problem. And then you have something that probably is going to work. So I would focus on that, because I honestly think everything else kind of comes after that. The content marketing worked because we had something where people found it really useful, and they could go from the article, discover the tool, sign up, and then actually become an active user of it. So really focus on retention. If you do launch something, I would stay super focused on retention as the first thing. Is are people that signed up 1-2 weeks ago still using the product? Because if they're not, then you kind of that's the cycle you want to quickly go around until you figure out something that people are using 2 weeks later, and then you have something that's probably going to work.
So now I'm going to open myself up to all sorts of problems with audio and mics, etc., by offering the floor. Maybe it's best to start to see if anyone has a question in Oslo at the minute.
Any questions here? One? Okay.
Cool.
All right. Hi.
Hi.
My name is Lars from Instrument Champ. I have a question regarding, I want to come back to content marketing. It seems to me that's that's a core aspect of both your product and your marketing strategy. So first of all, I want to ask how your work with content marketing has changed from starting to where you are today with 80 people in the team and 1.3 million users.
Yeah.
So do you see any big changes in that, and how do you organize the content marketing today?
That's a great one. In terms of the content itself, I think the key thing that's changed is that we went much broader, and then we've kind of come back a bit more focused again. So in the early days, we actually wrote a lot of articles about Buffer itself. That was very, very focused and very narrow. And then we started gradually realizing, we should write more broad content. And Rand Fishkin from Moz, SEO Moz, he has a really great thing that he said, which is that you should write content that appeals to someone that might know somebody that would use the product. So really very broad. And that's where we did the life hacking and things like that. And that worked really great for the consumer, free, like wide audience customers. And so we did that for a while. And then we recently, in the last 4 or 5 months, we've realized that we really needed to move more down like the business and enterprise kind of path. So that's what we focused a lot more on. And I think for that, more focused content around social media has been much more useful, and that's a way we can get people onto the trials for the business product and things like that. In terms of the team, that's a really great one as well. In terms of how that's evolved, we now have 2 content writers full time, and my co-founder Leo, so Leo did content marketing for pretty much the whole of the first year. It was kind of, he did content marketing and I built the product, and that was kind of the setup, and that worked really well for the first year. And then I think it's only about 6 months or so ago when we hired our first content writer, and we've just hired our second. So we just had our second content writer join the team. And so now Leo acts more like an editor. So he's not actually writing content himself anymore, but he's working with Belle and Courtney to come up with ideas for articles and to do editing and figuring out, and then scheduling and doing kind of the calendaring of the different articles. So that's working really well for us. I think we're going to start experimenting with webinars, and we've just started experimenting with paid acquisition as well. So those are really interesting things for us also. And one thing to mention is that since about maybe a year or year and a half ago, we also started to get a lot of users from the App Store and the Google Play Store. So we have iPhone and Android apps, and that does drive quite a lot of users for us as well.
Is it correct that the blog post is the major content type, or is there any other major content type?
Yeah, I think the blog post is the major content type. Yeah, we don't do too much other right now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cool. Thanks.
Anyone here?
I would like to ask you about, you mentioned this big mighty Silicon Valley. So I would like to hear more about what happened when you landed, and like all the escalation, what happened ever since.
I really wanted to get out to Silicon Valley just because I was curious to begin with. And so me and Leo just decided to book tickets to San Francisco. We came out here and we managed to meet a few really great people. One of the key people we met was Hitan Shah, the founder of Kissmetrics and Crazy Egg. And he's now an advisor for Buffer, and he's always been really helpful. And so we kind of came out with no real intentions. I'd actually decided not to really raise funding after the experiences with the previous startup, where I kind of spoke to a few investors and nothing quite worked out. But once we arrived, we realized there was quite a few bottlenecks in terms of I was still the only person building the product, but we had so many like validated ideas because of people using the product every day that we knew we needed to build things out. So we wanted to find someone else that could help out with development, and that's when we realized. So the revenues were not high enough to just hire somebody else at that point. We were only just about making what we needed for me and Leo to get by, especially in San Francisco, because we landed and I realized it's much more expensive in San Francisco than Birmingham in the UK. So yeah, and then we started thinking about fundraising. We tried to fundraise for a few weeks. We kind of failed quite miserably and learned a lot. And then we applied to AngelPad, and in that time we were actually starting to run out of money and thought, oh, maybe we'll have to go back to the UK and I might have to stay with my parents or something because I'd given up my flat and everything. But so we had this like slightly tight spot where the revenues were not growing quite fast enough. It was really expensive in San Francisco, and then we were trying to fundraise, learning a lot, not figuring it out. And then we got into AngelPad, and that really was a big turning point for us. So AngelPad's an accelerator like Y Combinator or Techstars, things like that. And so we did that for 6 months, and we did the accelerator for 3 months. We were in San Francisco for 6 months. I had to come back to the UK after 3 months because you can only go for 3 months at a time. I came back for 1 week and then went back and got asked a lot of questions at the border, and then after another 3 months there, and started to look at visas. And unfortunately, there's a quota every year on the visa, the type of visa that I got eventually got, which was for the H-1B work visa, and the cutoff, like, with the timing was just not great. So after during the second 3 months there, they ran out of visas, so they have a certain amount every year, and so I had to wait until basically another year for the new quota for the year for the visa. So me and Leo talked about, decided actually, so we couldn't stay in the US, unfortunately, even though it was a great time in San Francisco. And so we thought, well, it was a bit too exciting to just go back to the UK where I've been most of my life. So that's when we decided to go traveling and just travel with the startup. So we spent 6 months in Hong Kong and 3 months in Tel Aviv in Israel. And it was really incredido. And that's kind of, I think, where a lot of the way we've structured the company now in terms of being a distributed team came from, because we were pretty much a distributed team. During the time in Hong Kong and Tel Aviv, we had to grow the team further, and a lot of those initial people came from my personal network in the UK. So we had people from the UK when we were in Hong Kong and Tel Aviv and things. So yeah, and now luckily I've got a visa, and I really like it here in San Francisco. So, but yeah, that's kind of how things happen. It's been really exciting. I wouldn't change it at all. I really like the fact that I couldn't stay in the US at that time.
Back to Oslo, if there's another question there.
Hi, Joel. This is Sharif here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, my question was that, of course, it's a big question for everyone who's doing a startup. I mean, when did it go from a concept to generating your first revenue? And if you can just walk us through the process briefly, that's not asking too much.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, so I had the idea for Buffer, so that was September 2010, and I decided to try and act on it pretty quickly. So as soon as I had the idea, I built a very basic prototype for myself, which was I had to use the database directly and just type stuff into the database, and then it would post things for me. I had that working, and then that's when I started with these validation tests, where I did the 2-page website with the landing page and the page to collect emails. And yeah, so that was in the first week of having the idea. I did that, and I had the 2 different validation tests, one to check whether people would use the product, one to check whether people would pay for it, and just lots of email conversations and a couple of Skype calls during that time. And then it was 7 weeks after I had the idea that I launched the first actual version of the product. And then that was when, it was that's when people started using it and had active usage from then. And then 3 months after launch, 3 days after launching, there was the first paying customer. So that's kind of the timeline of how everything worked for me. I think it was pretty fast, I think. Although I would like to do it faster in the future, because I was working full time for other people during that whole time. So it took 7 weeks, which I feel was pretty fast, but that was 7 weeks of evening and weekend kind of work. So I would like to do it more quickly, because the key thing is you just want to be the risk is that you waste time, right? That you build something and it's not out there. And so anytime you're doing that, and I did that for 5, 6 weeks, and that was it could have been 5 or 6 weeks of wasted work. And I think it helped that I did those initial validation tests that helped me it to be much less likely that it would be wasted work. But I think anytime you're spending 2-3 months, which is very easy to do, anytime you're spending that much time building something without having it out there, without people using it and talking to people about the product, then I think that's quite risky. So that's what I try to avoid by just kind of following that process and getting it out there as quickly as possible.
I think we have time for one more question. Do we have one, Copenhagen? We have two here.
Hi Joel, thanks for your time. Simon
Hey.
from Project Canvas and Billy Tracker. In both the startups I'm part of, we have the Awesome Plan, which is pretty cool. One thing that I would like to ask you is if you use some editorial calendar or some tool or something to plan your content on top of Buffer, because I guess you're not just throwing out or buffering your content. Are you using some kind of tool or just a Google spreadsheet for that, or how do you do that?
So for the blog content, I know that Leo and Belle and Courtney, they use Trello. So we use Trello quite a lot for lots of different things in Buffer. And so we use Trello to like have, I think we have a board and then it has one column for each week, and we have like 5 cards on that column. So I think right now we're doing 1 post a day or sometimes 2 because Courtney's just started, so we're experimenting with doing a bit more now. In terms of just the actual social media content sharing, I think so. Buffer doesn't have like a calendar view feature, which is something that quite a lot of people are asking for. So we're probably going to build it out. But I think even just setting up the schedule and then viewing the timeline of the future content is still quite easy. So say if you're posting 5 times a day, so you can choose the exact schedule in like our schedule tab. You can say, I want to post 5 times a day or 10 times a day, whatever you choose. And then from then on, you're just adding the content to your Buffer without choosing the date or time. It's kind of just as easy to add to Buffer as it is to tweet like normally. And so once you do that, then it will just start lining up for the next like a week ahead. So if you have 30 posts, that'll be like the next 6 days, and it will just have like tomorrow as a heading, and then have like it'll just have the next few days as headings, and it'll have like 5 posts for each one. So I think that can work really well still. But I think some people have more complex kind of schedules around how they want to schedule the content. So I think a calendar view will be really useful for that. I'm trying to think if there's any. I know there's a tool, I can't remember the name of it. There's something for, I think it might be called Co-Schedule. I think it's for like calendar scheduling for your content, and it has Buffer integration. So we have an API, we have quite a few tools that integrate with Buffer, and I think they have integration. So that probably is a good tool that is something like on top of Buffer that would do that as well.
Going Oslo quickly.
Yeah.
Cool.
Hi, Joel.
Hey.
I'm Magna here, Norwegian entrepreneur.
Awesome.
What I found is always very difficult to figure out is where you are in the startup process. So what stage you're at, how long time you should be spending on that stage, and if you're running behind, because it's not really, you don't like have a map to track your progress, to say, oh, I'm running behind, or I should be here, or this is what I should be focusing on. So how did you know or learn at what stage you were at each time?
That's a great one. I think we're probably still figuring that out. I think in a lot of ways, as being kind of like a first-time founder, I sometimes reflect on how quickly we've moved with some things and think, oh, actually, if I was more experienced, if I'd kind of had a successful startup before, I'd probably move a lot faster. And I think one thing that might be useful is this idea of product market fit, because I think that's one thing I've really started to believe is that if I would say there's the first stage of a startup, I would say it's just that whole time before product market fit. So if you're trying to think about like what stage you're in, that would be the first one I would probably think about is, have you are you post product market fit? Because I think there's a good article. I think Mark Andreessen has an article where he says the only thing you should be doing before you hit product market fit is trying to hit product market fit. And I think that can really help you a lot, is to stay completely focused on that. So for example, with Buffer, in the early days, I was already registered as self-employed in the UK, so I didn't need to set up like a limited company or anything like that. I could still just build Buffer and try and make that work without doing any of those kind of formalities. And I think that's one thing that can lead you a little bit astray, is if you start to think about, there's so many things that are easy to think about a little bit too early, those kind of formalities, or even fundraising or hiring, these things. If you can be a couple of guys, that's one thing that worked really well for me and Leo, is that we had these kind of contrasting skill sets where I could build out the product, he could focus on marketing. And if you can have that combination and just focus, be those two people, 2 or 3 people, and just focus purely on reaching product market fit, finding something that does work, because then you start to get traction. And then I think after that, then there's like quite a few other stages that we're still figuring out, like starting to add some, for the longest time we were just a bunch of people, and now we start to think, oh, we need people that do specific things and other people that do other things. And then we start to even have like people that are leading teams and things like that. And so that's been really fun to think about how all those different phases as well. But I think like in terms of having a map in the early stages, like I think it's all about trying to hit product market fit. And it's hard because before you hit product market fit, not much can happen because you don't really have something that's working. So it's like, I read this interesting analogy once, which is bamboo. So I think the way bamboo grows is that it's like underground for like 5 years or something, and then one day it just like shoots out the ground, and it's like within a week or something, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but like within a week or something, it's just like grown to this huge like thing. And I think that's, for me, that was the experience. That's where I think, although it happened pretty quickly for me with Buffer in those 7 week that 7 week period where I had the idea and then built out the first version, I think all the time before that, doing my previous startup for 1.5 years, and even before that I had projects, that was all like the learning, that was like the underground part of the bamboo. And I think you just have to keep going and just know that like you've got to find that product market fit, and then things will happen. Like it's like product market fit is that point where like everything is happening, like you are just you will grow, and then you've got to like it's a different challenge at that point.
Last question here from Copenhagen, then we'll let you go.
Cool.
Hey Joel, thank you very much. My question was, you mentioned you had employees in 16 different cities. Do you ever wish kind of that you guys are all in the same room or the same floor so you don't have to schedule a Skype chat to talk with any of your employees? And what type of other challenges do you deal with by having such a distributed workforce?
I definitely don't ever wish that let me put it another way. I do wish sometimes. So we have 3 retreats every year. So we get together the whole team 3 times a year. So which is also just really fun. The first one we had was in San Francisco, and then we worked for 1 week from our office in San Francisco, and then we went to Lake Tahoe for the weekend, which was really fun. And then the last one we did was in December. The first week of December, we all got together in Thailand. And the next one we're doing in April, we're going to Cape Town. So this is really fun, and I think it's really important as well, because we don't actually know each other in person. Like we talk on video chat like a lot, like every day we talk on video chat, but it's a different thing when you meet in person and you kind of have that extra connection. But I actually think that there's so many benefits to working in a distributed way that I think this is, for us, is like almost a perfect setup where we get together regularly 3 times a year, and sometimes we fly people out to San Francisco as well. Like if they've joined at a point where they just miss one of these retreats and we're not going to see them like for 4 months, then sometimes we'll fly them out. But I think it works really well because there's, 2 examples. One is customer support. We can have like 24-hour customer support, because we have there's 5 people full-time in customer support right now out of the 18 in the team, and it's just a huge focus for us, and that was one of the key reasons we decided to be distributed, is that I felt, I was in Hong Kong, and I felt like, why should the fact that someone happens to be using Buffer from Hong Kong mean that they should get a worse customer support experience? And the other example is doing development, right? So last year, in October, some of you might have noticed, we got hacked, and it was like really crazy. It was pretty difficult to handle. But one of the cool things was that because we're distributed, we could have both in terms of customer support and keeping people kind of calm and keeping them aware of what's going on, and also in terms of development and investigation around like what had happened with the hack. We could have like this 24-hour kind of rolling schedule where stuff was just going on all the time, and it lasted like 5 days or even a week, the whole kind of figuring out everything with the hacking. And that's something where in the past, and there was times like this where we went down in the past, and in the first kind of year or two where there's not enough of us and I just had to be awake for like 48 hours straight or something. But like this time around, we could all just get good sleep and just keep going with stuff. So I think there's a lot of benefits, and it's just fun as well to have so many people, like different people from different cultures, all just getting to know each other, and we're all kind of aligned in the values of the culture, but we're all very different people as well. So I really love it this way. I'm also introverted, so I can work by myself and kind of get away from people sometimes, which is great. Like, I think it would be harder in a big office with everyone there.
I just want to say thank you for giving such a great insight and a transparency into your day-to-day working with Buffer, and for giving such detailed answers to the questions that we gave you.
Thanks so much, Neil. And yeah, and if I can ever help anyone, I'd love to hear from you. You can just tweet me or email me as well. I'm joel@bufferapp.com. So yeah, I would love to hear anything anyone's up to. Yeah, thanks so much. It's been really cool. I definitely think it was a success with the 2 cities.
That's great.